a high-quality knowledge podcast for hitchhikers traveling the galaxy. This is Lab 42.
There's a term in engineering, it's called gold plating.
Right.
It's this trap designers fall into where they just keep adding features, polishing specs until a product is, technologically perfect.
But it's so expensive and so complex you can barely afford to build it.
Exactly.
And in the military world, gold plating isn't just an annoyance. I mean, for the last 30 years, it's effectively been the strategy.
The silver bullet.
The silver bullet. You look at Western defense, especially U.S. doctrine, and the goal has always been that 100% invincible weapon.
Like the F-22 Raptor or the F-35. They're basically science fiction made real.
They are engineering marvels. No one's disputing that. But we're seeing this massive shift in the global landscape. And that's what we're digging into today. We've got a stack of reports here analyzing the rise of the South Korean defense industry.
K-defense.
K-defense. And a philosophy that is just completely upending the global arms market.
Yeah, it's this pivot from the silver bullet to what analysts are calling the 80% solution. Now, I have to be honest, when I first read that term, it just sounded like marketing spin for second best.
Like buying the knockoff brand at the grocery store.
Right.
It does sound that way on the surface. But if you actually dig into the data, the strategic papers, it's a brutal calculation of reality. The unofficial motto of K-defense is something like 80% of the performance for 60% of the cost.
So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out if that's a winning strategy or just a bargain bin compromise. We're going to look at 3 specific case studies, a jet, a rocket launcher, and a warship, that really show why this is happening now.
And we have to start with the catalyst, the big wake-up call for the entire world.
Well, war in Ukraine.
Absolutely, because that conflict just changed the whole conversation. We're not talking about some hypothetical high-tech push-button war anymore.
No, we are seeing a grinding industrial war of attrition.
That is the key context. I mean, when you're losing equipment every single day to artillery and cheap suicide drones, you realize that perfect is the enemy of present.
You just can't afford to lose a $100 million system to a $5,000 drone.
And even if you have the money, you can't replace it fast enough. The manufacturing lines for those silver bullets are incredibly slow.
So the Korean philosophy, it's not about making cheap knockoffs. The sources call it intelligent trade-offs.
It's the difference between being product-driven and mission-driven. The U.S. ecosystem, it often asks, can we make this fly 1% faster? Can the radar see 5 miles further?
That's product-driven, chasing specs on a brochure.
Exactly. Whereas the mission-driven approach asks,
what do I actually need to blow up that tank right now?
That's it. K-defense targets that sweet spot. They balance lethality. Can it do the job? With reliability and, crucially, economic feasibility. Because if you can't afford enough of them to defend your border, the specs are totally irrelevant.
A tank that doesn't exist because you couldn't afford it has zero lethality.
And this whole philosophy, it sort of democratizes high-end military power.
Right. It opens the door for a lot of countries that aren't superpowers.
If you're Poland or the Philippines or a Gulf state, you want deterrence. But you might not have the budget for top-tier U.S. hardware, or, frankly, you might not want the political strings that come with it.
Okay, let's get into the hardware. I want to see how this 80% theory actually flies. Literally, let's start with the sky. The F-A-50 Fighting Eagle.
This aircraft is really the poster child of the whole movement. Now, typically, when a country wants to build a supersonic fighter, they start from scratch. It's a national ego project.
It takes 20 years, billions of dollars, and usually fails a few times.
But Korea didn't do that. They looked at what they already had. They had the T-50, which is a trainer jet they developed with Lockheed Martin.
So a proven platform. It works. It's already in the air.
It's in the air. Pilots love it. So they took this flying classroom.
And just strapped missiles to it?
In simple terms, yeah. They gave it teeth. They added a radar, a gun, hard points for missiles. But by using an existing airframe, they just bypassed years of risky R&D.
But surely a modified trainer jet can't compete with a dedicated fighter like an F-16 or a French Rafale.
In a one-on-one dogfight with a top-tier pilot, maybe not. But that's not the mission. The F-A-50 isn't trying to be an air superiority fighter. It's filling a huge market gap for countries that just need some supersonic capability.
The Philippines is the example that stood out to me. Things were pretty dire for them for a while.
A stark situation. Back in 2005, they retired their old American F-5s, and for a full decade, they had 0 supersonic jets. Nothing.
The toothless eagles. That's what the press called them.
Yep.
I mean, they were sending out propeller planes to chase off intruders.
It was a humiliation for their Air Force. But they couldn't afford new F-16s. The price was just too high. So they looked at the F-A-50. They bought 12 of them for about $30 million each.
That's what, a third of the price of a modern F-16?
Roughly, yeah. And suddenly, they're back in the game. I saw the quote from President Aquino when the jets landed. He said, "Anyone intruding will think twice."
And it wasn't just talk, was it?
Not at all. In 2017, the Battle of Marawi happened. ISIS-linked militants seized an entire city. The Philippine army was just pinned down in brutal urban combat.
Snipers everywhere, concrete buildings. They needed air support, fast.
And the training jets delivered. The troops on the ground called them Steel Hawks. They were dropping precision-guided bombs through windows. It proved the whole thesis.
You don't need a stealth fighter to kill terrorists in a city. You just need a reliable truck that can drop a bomb accurately.
That is the 80% solution in action.
But it's not just developing nations buying them. Poland, a NATO member on the front lines, is buying them too. Why would they want a lesser jet?
Because they're smart about the high-low mix. Poland has bought the American F-35. That's the ultimate stealth fighter, the strategic dagger. But here's the data point that matters. An F-35 costs about $40,000 per hour to fly.
40 grand an hour. That's insane.
It's completely unsustainable for daily patrols. The F-A-50 costs less than $10,000 an hour. So Poland uses the F-A-50 as the workhorse for air policing, and saves the F-35s for the really high-value missions.
It's like having a Ferrari for the track, but you buy a high-performance pickup for your daily heavy lifting.
You don't take the Ferrari to Home Depot, and that efficiency translates to combat readiness. The money they save on flight hours means their pilots get 4 times the training time.
And pilot skill often matters more than having a slightly better radar.
In a real chaotic war, absolutely.
Okay, let's move to the ground. Everyone knows about HIMARS. The U.S. rocket launcher that became the god of war in Ukraine. Why would anyone buy anything else?
Well, HIMARS is a fantastic system.
Yeah.
But from a buyer's perspective, it has 2 big problems. 1, everyone wants it, so the waiting list is years long.
And 2?
It's a closed system. It's a black box. You buy it, you use it, you do not touch the insides.
Which brings us to the Korean challenger, the K239 Chunmoo.
Right. And it all comes down to design philosophy. HIMARS was built for a global expeditionary force. It has to fit inside a C-130 transport plane to fly anywhere in the world.
So it has to be light.
Exactly. And to keep it light, it's unarmored, and it only carries 1 pod of 6 rockets.
Yeah.
But South Korea, they aren't flying their launchers around the world. Their mission is defending the Korean peninsula.
So they don't care as much about the weight.
Not really. They prioritized firepower and crew survival. The Chunmoo is built on a heavy, armored 8x8 truck, and it carries 2 rocket pods.
Double the firepower.
Double the firepower per truck. That's a clear trade-off. Give up air transportability to gain punch and protection.
But the real game changer, especially for buyers like Poland, was the open architecture.
This is huge. The U.S. says, take our truck. Korea said to Poland, you have your own truck industry, right? JELTS. And Poland said,
yes, and we want to support our local economy.
So Korea said, fine, we'll put our launcher on your truck, and we'll integrate it with your fire control system.
That's refusing vendor lock-in. It allows Poland to keep its domestic industry alive.
It does. But there's one more detail about the Chunmoo that is just the most pragmatic thing of all.
The ammunition.
The ammo. It can fire the fancy GPS-guided missiles, of course, but it's also designed to fire old, dumb, unguided rockets.
Why would a modern army want to do that?
Because they have warehouses full of them. Countries have all these expiring munitions they have to pay to get rid of. The Chunmoo turns a disposal cost into a cheap training weapon.
That is the definition of practical. Poland gets HIMARS for sniping high-value targets, and the Chunmoo as the steel hammer for mass fire.
Exactly. It's a portfolio. You don't use a scalpel to chop wood.
All right, let's hit the waves. The Makassar-class landing ships. This one might be the wildest example in the whole stack.
It's certainly the most creative, so think about an island nation like Indonesia or the Philippines.
Thousands of islands. They don't need an aircraft carrier, they need a bus.
A bus, an ambulance, and a police car all in one. They need to move troops, handle disaster relief, chase pirates. Now, usually a military landing ship is a custom-built, very expensive hull.
And Korea took a different route.
The designers at the shipyard looked at a commercial car ferry. You know, the kind that shuttles tourists and cars between islands.
Wait, they built a warship based on a civilian ferry.
They adapted the commercial blueprint, they reinforced it, added a deck for helicopters, a well deck in the back for landing craft. But the DNA is a car ferry.
That must have just slashed the cost.
Drastically. They sold 4 ships, plus the tech transfer, for about $150 million. That's half the price of a single Western ship of that size.
But here's the twist I found fascinating: the platform strategy. Korea didn't just sell ships to Indonesia.
They taught them how to fish. They partnered with PTPAL, the Indonesian shipyard. Korea built the first 2, and Indonesia built the next 2 locally.
And then Indonesia turned around and exported those ships to the Philippines.
It looks like Korea created a competitor, doesn't it?
Bad business.
Great business. It created a win-win ecosystem. By letting Indonesia build the lower-cost hulls, the Korean design became the standard in Southeast Asia. The Makassar class is now the workhorse of the sea for that whole region.
So even if the ship is welded together in Indonesia, it's Korean IP. It uses Korean engines, Korean electronics.
And it builds a diplomatic network. Those ships are crucial for the Philippines. When a typhoon hits, that ship is the lifeline. It's a perfect fit for their needs because it wasn't over-engineered.
Okay, so we've talked about the jet, the launcher, the ship, but none of this happens in a vacuum. There's an invisible hand pushing all of this.
This is the final piece of the puzzle. You can't talk about K-defense without the Korean state. These prices aren't magic. They're the result of a calculated national strategy.
How involved is the government?
Intimately. You have DAPA, the Defense Acquisition Program Administration, and the ADD, the Agency for Defense Development. They fund the initial R&D.
So the taxpayer takes the risk of the invention failing, not the company.
Correct. The government absorbs that risk so companies can focus on efficient production. By the time they export the weapon, the tech is already proven and paid for.
And then there's the financing. When Poland bought all that gear, they didn't have billions in cash just sitting around.
No, that was a huge hurdle. So Axiom, the Export-Import Bank of Korea, stepped in. They provided massive loans and guarantees. They basically said, we'll lend you the money to buy our stuff.
It's using finance as a weapon.
Or as a lubricant for the deal. And finally, there's the offset policy. Western companies typically hate offsets, where you have to give tech or jobs to the buyer.
But Korea leans into it.
They remember being a developing nation, they get the hunger to industrialize, so they treat tech transfer not as a loss, but as an investment in a partner.
You mentioned a term in the notes, destiny community.
It sounds poetic, but it's a very sticky business model. If Poland builds Korean tanks in Polish factories, they'll need Korean parts, Korean upgrades, Korean software for the next 30 years.
It's the end of the black box era.
Yeah.
You're not just buying a crate, you're buying an industrial marriage.
That's the perfect way to put it. It ties the security of the buyer to the economy of the seller. It creates a mutual dependency.
So, zooming out, what does this all mean for the listener who isn't shopping for a tank today?
It means the era of the silver bullet is fading. The world is realizing that perfection is a luxury. In business, in technology, in defense, the winners are the ones who ask, what is the actual mission? And find the most pragmatic way to solve it.
The 80% solution. It's not about settling. It's about being smart enough to know when to stop engineering.
And it raises a pretty provocative question for the future, doesn't it? As this model spreads and more countries start sharing technology and building these good enough ecosystems, are we seeing the end of the superpower monopoly on high-end defense?
When you democratize firepower, you change the map.
Maybe the most powerful weapon isn't the one with the highest specs, but the one that fits the hand that holds it and the wallet that pays for it.
That is something to think about. Go find your 80% solution today. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
That's all for today's episode of Lab 42. If you enjoyed this story of impossible engineering, leave us a review. Safe travels, hitchhikers. See you in the next galaxy.